This is Lisa Tucker, host of The Book Cover, which showcases local literary personalities. So listen to The Book Cover on the borderline. And remember, don't judge a book by its cover. Hi, this is Lisa Tucker. You were listening on The Borderline, and this is The Book Cover. And today I have the Northern Canadian specialist of Stompin Tom Connors. I have author, musician, Duncan Fremlin. Welcome, Duncan.
Thank you, Lisa. Great to speak to you.
Yeah, it is good to speak. And, I mentioned earlier, this interview is a long time in the making. We have had life get in the way, and we finally got to have the stars align. So I'm so happy to have this interview. Finally, we're getting it in. Now I'm talking to you as an author, but you were a musician first. So tell me about how that all started. Tell me how the musician part of your life started.
Well, again, that's my introduction to Stompin Tom. As a fan, actually, more than as a musician. My first introduction to Tom was, what was that hotel on Queen Street? The King. Oh, I forget the name of the hotel. Famous country and western bar down near Pym. On the north side. Anyway,
well, there's the Algonquin. There was
not the Algonquin. Is it the King George? Was there a King George? No, it wasn't the Eastgate.
No.
It wasn't Lock City. It wasn't.
Jeez, I'm naming all the old 80s bars right now.
Yeah. Well, this is a 60s bar, an old country and western bar.
Jeez, I don't. It's not the one that burnt down.
It could be. Shame on me for not remembering this, but
it'll come to you. It'll come to you throughout the interview, and you'll just blurt it out.
I'm sure it will. So my friend Crystallizer, he and I went to Sir James Dunn together, and we were pals. He came to listen to some music to my place one day, and we were this was back in the day with Led Zeppelin, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and all that.
Oh, sure.
But he walks in with his Stompin Tom album, and I'd never heard of Stompin Tom. I don't think I was about 17 or 18 at the time. So he walks in with this thing, and we'd just been listening to some of the best music that the centuries created. And
Sure.
he puts this album on, and it's Bud the Spud. And you got to remember, I'm 17 or 18 years old. This is the last thing I wanted to hear. I didn't want to hear this hokey East Coast
folky
Bud the Spud thing.
Yeah.
So I told him at the time, I said, man, take that off. I can't deal with it. And then wouldn't you know it, not too many years later, I'm in his band and I'm touring the country and loving every song that he ever wrote. So the whole thing kind of happened serendipitously and very quickly when it gets right down to it. But, my music introduction began with CJIC, the old Don Ramsey show.
I remember.
Back in the 50s, and we would listen to it every night at supper. And so I was introduced to country music, from a very young age. And I was in the Kiwanis Festival, so I was a singer in those days. And so the music part, it was in my bones. And then one thing led to another, pick up a banjo, and next thing you know, I'm in a band and I'm touring the country. So that's the Coles Note version. But really, if it wasn't for my early years in Sault Ste. Marie or a Pumpkin Point Road,
right,
then I wouldn't be here talking to you about Stompin Tom or anything.
Right. So your instrument of choice, is it the banjo, or are you one of those that play a wide array of instruments?
I started on the guitar. I was a really lousy folk guitar strummer, but when I picked up the banjo, that was really the instrument that spoke to me, and I became quite consumed by the instrument, and I haven't looked back. I still strum the guitar a little bit, but my interest is really with the banjo.
Wow. And you were in Stompin Tom's band.
Yeah, well, I toured with him, recorded with him. I was friends with him, would go up and play at the house. And so, we just sort of hit it off. We were, kind of like-minded people in a way. Both of us are highly principled, stubborn, ornery when we have to be, very musical. And we just sort of became pals. And one thing led to another. And next thing you know, I'm, like I said, on tour with them and, making music with them. So this whole thing has happened after he died, and someone had to continue with the tradition, and I seemed to be the logical one. I had the band, and I had the stories, and I had the songs, so I just kind of kept it going. And there's an audience for it. They keep calling me and asking me to go and perform. So
Right.
as long as that's happening, I'm going to continue doing it. As to whether I'm a Stompin Tom specialist or not, I guess in some ways I am. I don't know. I'm not an academic, so I don't go back and study the uh, the history of Tom and Skinner's Pond, and I know all those stories and everything, but they don't really hold as much interest for me as the actual music itself, the songs. I'm convinced that in the centuries to come, Stompin' Tom will not be forgotten in Canada, but it's not the stories about his stomping that's gonna survive. I think the songs will survive. The songs really are classic melodies and fantastic lyrics, and I really think the songs are kind of gonna, be the main focus of the generations to come.
Well, I'll tell you. I always now I don't know how I always knew who Stompin Tom I think that you are a bad Canadian if you do not know who Stompin Tom is. You
Yes.
are a bad Canadian. Everybody, Canadians should know him. And for us here in Northern Ontario, of course, the song Sudbury Saturday Night is a classic. That's the first one.
Well, you're in the Sioux, Lisa, so you have to be talking about she's on a bar hopping spree back in Sault Ste. Marie.
See, I don't.
Because of me, she's like a fallen star. Come on,
I
that's the main one for the Sioux.
what's that song called?
Algoma 69.
See, I didn't know that one. I'm good. You know what? I'm gonna have to brush up on my Stompin' Tom because that's awesome. I love that. And did he spend much time in Northern Ontario?
He, I would say, he was born in the Maritimes. He owned property down there. He visited, he toured there. That was his main region. But his second region was Northern Ontario. He really made it big first in Timmins. That's where the whole thing began. So, yeah, Northern Ontario was probably the most important region in central Canada. So many of his classic hits, A Little Wah Wah, Sudbury Saturday Night, like you say, Algoma 69. These are Northern Ontario songs.
Sure, they are. Yeah, and this now. Did he ever give the story about his stomping? Like why, or was
Yeah,
it
well,
just part of him?
no. The story is that he was playing a bar. I think it was in Peterborough, and he was stomping on the carpet on the stage, and he was chewing it up. And the bar owner was getting a little pissed off, and said, "You're gonna have to pay for the carpet if you keep chewing it up with your boot." Because he would nail cleats to his boots. I don't know if this is something that we used to do in the 60s, and walk down the hallway at Sir James Dunn with little pieces of steel nailed to our heels so that we click as we walk down. This was what was described as being cool in
Ah,
1964, 63. So Tom had these things on his boots, and he would chew up the carpet. And finally, to prevent the carpet from being destroyed, he pulled out a piece of plywood and started stomping on the plywood, and it became a thing. And a bartender started calling him Stompin' Tom, and next thing you know, that became his moniker. And his, if it wasn't for that moniker, Lisa, there's a good chance he wouldn't be half as popular as he is today. But it's the classic case of good branding, just like Pepsi and Coke they have to have their brand. Everything, when you think of a product, you think of a certain thing. Well, when you think of Tom, you think of Stompin', and I think
absolutely.
without that name, he wouldn't be the star
I think
that he became.
I think you're right about that. I mean, we have lots of talent. There's talent everywhere.
Yes.
It's how they are marketed and how they come across, as you said, branding. And branding wasn't a big deal back in the 50s, the 60s. But he lucked out that he was a stomper, and then Stompin' Tom. You don't even have to say his last name, and people know who you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I don't want to attribute too much of it to luck, because this was a marketing master. Tom knew more about marketing in 65, 60, no, 67 is when he started using Stompin. So he knew more about marketing in 67 than the majority of people know in 2024. So as a marketing expert, he was a bit of a genius, and he capitalized on
Ah.
this
So
repeatedly.
he didn't just trip into this. It was on purpose.
Well, he did trip into it in that someone started calling him that, but he took it and he ran with it, and he made something of it. Nothing would have happened if he hadn't had the smarts to make something of this, and certainly he did. I mean, his fame began pretty quickly after this started in the late 60s.
Right. So now you're okay. So you you explained sort of that you were, involved with the music. You were involved that way with Tom. Now we're missing a little bit of time. So how does a St. Joe's Island boy and then eventually Pumpkin Point Road become a banjo player with Stompin Tom? Like what happened in between there? Did you move to the big city and audition,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
you did, eh? Yeah.
Well, I went to university. I went to York University in early 70s, and
Right.
so I moved to Toronto. I ended up staying in Toronto after I finished my studies, and I just happened to meet a fella that was playing a mandolin, and the two of us hit it off, and we could sing well together, and we started a band. And this was in 77, and then in 79, I think we quit our jobs. We went on the road. We were touring as Whiskey Jack. We used to play Blind River and the Sioux, and the North, Schumacher, and so we did all the six nighters in Canada for a couple of years. And then I got a call from the producer at the Tommy Hunter show,
Yep.
CBC's Tommy Hunter show,
Yep.
and they were looking for a four-piece acoustic / bluegrass band to be featured on a special comedy segment that they had. And so we auditioned for that. We got the gig, and we were on the Tommy Hunter show for a few years. And so when Tom wanted a band for an album that he was doing, he knew of us because he used to watch us on the Tommy Hunter show.
Well, who didn't?
So, well, he told me, thank you. Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
he told me years later that he would on a Friday night go upstairs and turn on the TV in his living room and watch Whiskey Jack on the Tommy Hunter show. So those things were connected, and I'm sure one wouldn't have happened without the other. And it's just it's just one of those things that life is a series of coincidences and intentional acts, and this was the combination of the two.
Right. See, that's why I asked that question, because I always love the stories. I always say walking is just controlled fall. And
Yeah.
life is all these events that occur in life to get you where you need to be. It's almost a controlled fall to the event. So, and that's why I love asking those questions. Now, when did the book come out? My Good Times with Stompin Tom. When did that book come out?
Okay, so the lead up to the book is this. So
Yeah, tell me that. Sure.
I started this tour. Tom died in 2013. I hosted a birthday celebration for him. So I used to go up to the house with Whiskey Jack, Tom's house, and perform at his birthday parties and his barbecues and whatnot. So when he died in 2013, I knew I wasn't going to get any more invitations up to the house to play at his birthday party. So I hosted my own birthday party at a sleazy bar in downtown Toronto, a bar that he would have approved of, and it was a huge hit. It was a sellout. I had some fairly big stars show up and perform, and so I started to get invitations to perform the show after we did that show. This was in Toronto in February of 2014, and so leading up to that, for 3 years, I was touring. I was booking shows. I was creating set lists for, my show is called Stories and Songs, so it's a combination of my stories about Tom as well as songs that we learned from him.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm a bit of a writer myself, so I thought, well, I'm going to, rather than just tell these stories from the stage, I'm going to put them in book form and sell the book from the stage. And this was 2018. And I'm already pretty close to 1,500 sales of a self-published book about Stompin Tom, which by Canadian literary standards, I've been told,
That's a
is
home
the
run.
best. It's a homer.
Yes, especially self-published. Absolutely. Wow. Who did you publish with? Like yourself?
No, yeah, myself.
Oh, yourself.
There's
Yeah.
a yeah, there's a place in Quebec that makes them for me. Whenever I need some, I email I email Luke and tell him to send me some copies. So, but like I said, I'm almost up to 15. It's still selling well. We're
Hmm.
going down east again in the fall, and I sold last year. I sold. I don't know. There's still an audience for this, and yeah, the book's good. So I don't know. It just
Well, I
it's
think
what.
there'll always be an audience for this because you've got people like yourself who were right in the thick of things when Tom was big, and then you have people like me, a little younger, who remember his songs with great nostalgia. And it's that nostalgia too that brings this book to people, or brings the
Yes,
people to the book, I guess.
you're absolutely right.
It's that again, I said, you're a bad Canadian if you don't know who Stompin Tom Connors is. He's such a Canadian, dare I say, icon. All of his songs are something that each Canadian can, there's at least one song that each Canadian can relate to, whether you're out west, out east, or Northern Ontario like we are. So I could totally see how there would be a market for that. Like I'm not surprised that you sold so many. I'm not surprised at all. Now, you said, of course, you're a good writer. You've written this book. What was your background? What did you graduate with when you went to York?
Philosophy.
Oh, no. Okay. So,
It was a good liberal arts degree,
yeah, so
and
you
of
had a good
course,
3 years there.
yeah, and it it led to, I had a government job for a while, and then I quit that and went on the road for a while. So, it's one of those majors that opens doors to other things. It wasn't obviously I wasn't going to be a philosopher. I wasn't going to work as a professor or anything. I had no interest in that, but I was interested in bettering myself and as a with this subject, which is why I did that.
Sure. Now, you mentioned open doors. I always ask, what experiences have you had that came of this book? So if you would never written the book, you wouldn't have had these experiences. Tell me about
That
some of
is a
those.
great
I
question.
know. I
Just
know.
I got to tell you. So the first thing that I noticed when I published this book was I've been working in the music industry, the business of music, for 40 years, and so it's the first thing that happened when I published this book and I started selling. I mean, I just started spreading the word. This is what I do. I That's how I've been able to keep the band going for 45 years. That's how I've been able to keep the tour going for 10 years. That's how I've been able to sell 1,500 copies of the book. I get the word out. I'm not ashamed to be a salesman. I'm shameless when it gets right down to it. What I noticed right off the bat was, and I would send copies out to, like, for example, Brian McFarlane, the sports writer, worked for the CBC. He's published 9,500 books.
Right.
So I sent him a copy just out of the blue, and he emailed me back, and we've become great buddies. And he's helped introduce me to some people. I got a hold of Leona Boyd, who was she was
I
her first
remember.
album was on her first album was on Tom's label. So I sent a copy to her, and she started spreading the word. And Tyler Stewart from the Barenaked Ladies, that plays hockey with Tyler, and he helped spread the word. And a TV personality, Sean Cullen, the comedian, another friend of mine. So I just started spreading the word about this. And what I noticed right off the bat, Lisa, is how much friendlier the business of books is compared to the business of music. The business of music is very it's very, I hate to use the word cutthroat, because I'm sure there's some of that in literature as well, but it's very very competitive and very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Book dealers, I've had I've had a lot of run-ins, or every time I go to a town, I take the book to the local bookstore and I ask them if they'll sell it on consignment for me. And so I've got it in. It's in Sudbury. It was in the Sioux for a while until this bookstore closed. It was, so I've had it all over the country, and I just find these people so friendly and so helpful and so gracious, and it was so different from what I experienced in the music industry. So there's certainly that. And also the other thing that it's hard to really measure is my status in the music business, just in general, has gone up because I'm an author now.
Right.
It's not just I produce good albums. I have a really terrific show. I tour with this band and all of that stuff. I've been on TV and all that. But as soon as I published this book, I got attention from areas in the business that I would never have gotten attention from. I can't give you specific examples, but I do know that when I call, if I call someone, I'm looking to book a show, for example, in Chatham, Ontario, before I even make the call, I'm going to take this book and mail it to the person. And they're going to have a copy on their desk when I call, and they're going to know who I am.
Yeah,
and
smart.
It just opens a lot of doors. And so it's one of the best things I've done, not just in terms of marketing, but just as a personal satisfaction
in life. Yeah.
It's been really something else. And there's the other strategic byproduct that came from this is that Tom's best man at his wedding, his best friend, his songwriting partners, he's a man named Gates Lapine, born in Quebec but raised in Timmins, and he's the bartender. There's a legend that goes around when Tom was a bum in 1964 and he was thinking about quitting the business, and he was just hitchhiking across the country, walked into a bar in Timmins, and the bartender noticed that he had a guitar in his hand, and Tom asked how much a beer was, and he was a nickel short. So the bartender said, "I'll tell you what, I'll lend you a nickel if you play a song on that guitar." And that bartender, his name is Gate Lapine. He was a singer-songwriter himself, and that led to many decades long friendship with Tom. And Gates today is 86, living alone, and he's a widower and living in Ottawa. He wrote his own book that's not published. It's called Hard Knock Graduate. So I am now working closely with him and helping him get his story out.
Wow.
And in some ways, I'm very excited about this, because in some ways, his story is more engaging than Tom's story. He's an amazing man, and has written some spectacular songs. And anyway, he's become a big part of my life in the last few years, and this wouldn't have happened had I not published this book.
Wow. I love hearing that, because it's a controlled fall. Life is a controlled fall. So again, if Tom wouldn't have stumbled into this bar, and if he wouldn't have been a nickel short, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about him.
Exactly right.
Right.
A nickel, Lisa.
Right. 5 cents.
A nickel. 5 cents.
Which might be $2 at today's inflationary prices.
Maybe.
Still, it's a pittance. You mentioned how the writing world isn't as cutthroat as the music world, and I have these conversations with friends all the time, mostly my academic friends, and so it's still cutthroat, but because the intelligence is higher in the book writing business, the cutthroat isn't as overt. So you might not notice it, but it's
good
there.
Point.
But
good,
it's
good
there.
Point. I think you're exactly right. I never thought about that before, but there's no question the intelligence level is superior in the literary community. No question about that.
Yeah. So, is this going to be your only book?
No, like I said, I'm working on something with my new friend Gates.
Right. And are you going to
Yeah.
Are you going to co-author that or?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. No. It's going to be my book, but I'm going to be using a lot of his content.
Okay.
His content it's not in sequence. He's a French Canadian writing in English. So
Wow.
everything that he's done, he's written 5,000 songs. He's written books of poetry. He paints. He's a painter. He he's just, his stories are riveting. He writes in a beautifully poetic style, very very personal, very emotional. He's a very emotional guy, and it comes through in his literature. And so I'm just sort of smoothing it out and putting it in a more kind of a more accessible form, but
Okay.
he's the focus. It's his story
Mm-hmm.
that we're telling, and I'm just sort of setting it up, each story up, kind of thing. So
And
yeah.
when do you think that'll be out?
Well, what I'm doing right now, if your listeners are interested, there's the thing called Substack. I don't know if you're familiar with Substack or not, but
I'm not.
it's an online. It's kind of like, I hate to describe it as a blog because it's much more than that. Margaret Atwood has an account. Leah McLaren has an account. It's a it's a the literary community is really flocking to this format, and what it is it allows me to upload my stories. I can attach. Um, I have a library of videos and audio and interviews with Gates and interviews with Tom. I have all this library. So this format allows me to upload this into the stories. So it's a much more whole, more fulfilling story.
Like
Uh,
multimedia, not just the written word.
Absolutely, absolutely right.
Right.
People can subscribe.
And
If
what's
you're
the name of
interested
that
in,
again?
I just it's called banjodunk.substack.com. And
Okay.
if you just go on that, you'll see it's not www. It's just banjodunk.substack.com. And I've already got some stories out there. So my goal is, and I love talking to you about this because you're an author yourself, but I love the format because it's allowing me to try out these stories and see what works in what sequence, you know. And then once I've got a gazillion of these up, I'll be able to. I've only been doing this for a month or two, and I'm already much more clear in my thinking as to what I want to do with this. And so, in the meantime,
Mm-hmm.
the audience, my fans can follow my work. They can, they can subscribe and read my stories about Gate and Tom
Oh, I love it.
and
I'll
you
be
know
doing that as soon as we stop recording. That's great. Um,
yeah.
Now you mentioned there was a place in the Sioux that you could actually get a print copy. So there's nowhere right now.
No, I think they closed. I got a call from them. It was in the Station Mall.
Oh,
I got a
okay.
call from them a couple of years ago saying that come and get the copies they had. But if people want a copy, they can buy it online at whiskeyjackmusic.com. Whiskey with an E, whiskeyjackmusic.com.
Whiskey Jack. Oh yeah, I have that here. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. And you know what? When we stop recording, there's a great place in the Sioux that does sell all local or locally connected material, books, music, clothing,
great.
art. So I'll connect you with that. It's called The
Thank you.
Artesian, and I definitely think that that your book should be in here
Yes.
because St. Joe's. I still consider it a local boy, so I think you're still a local boy done good.
All
So
darn right.
yeah, darn right it is. And now you were in the Sioux in the summertime
Yes.
ish. Do you plan on coming through and maybe playing some music anytime soon? Are we?
Well, I booked a show. Well, first of all, in the summertime, I don't tour with the Stompin Tom show in the summer. It's a theater show, so we mostly tour spring and fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so come June, we don't tour. Occasionally, I'll get a call to do the Tom show, but most of the time it's in the fall and spring. So, but during the summer, I do Whiskey Jack plays at parks and fairs and festivals and that kind of thing. So last year, I'm an old park ranger. I used to work up on the North Shore of Lake Superior with Department of Lands and Forests, and
You're
I worked
so
at Pancake.
Canadian. You were so
I,
Canadian. I love
well,
it.
I worked at Searchmount, Hawk
Of
Junction,
course you did.
uh, Pancake Bay, all those places. So last year, I have talked to the park superintendent at Pancake Bay, which is another park that I worked at when I was 16 or 17. And so they brought the band up, and we did a special show. at Pancake Bay, and it was just one of the highlights of the summer for me and the band. And we're coming back. I just found out last week that we're going to do it again. And again, if people get on the website, they can find out where and when we're going to be at Pancake Bay. So we are going to be coming through in July. Whether or not we do a page show or not, I'm not sure. But last year, I have a 90 some odd year old aunt, my dad's sister, who lives in the home on Great Northern Road. I forget what it's called.
The Davy home.
No, not that. Sorry, Trunk Road, I think. The one leading into the city from Sudbury.
There's Pathways.
Yep. So she's at Pathways. So she's my dad's sister. And all things being equal, we'll stop in there on the way to Pancake Bay or on the way back, and we'll do a show for those folks. We did a show for those folks last year, and we did one in Thessalon for my dad's brother, but he died a few weeks after that, so we won't be stopping in Thessalon, but we'll probably stop in the Sioux and do a show, and that'll just be a freebie for the staff and for the residents of Pathways. So otherwise, I don't think June we might come up in Richard's Landing and do a fundraiser. That's yet to be determined. I'll know about that probably before the end of this month.
Well, hopefully you'll let me know when you'll be in the Sioux, so I can get the word out, whether you're doing it in Pancake Bay, whether you're going to be at St. Joe's. It's not a long drive, and this would be something, like I said, the nostalgia of this, the music, and even any type of a banjo band I love. It's just nostalgic, I think. But Duncan, thank you so much for bringing this book out and letting us know a little bit more about Stompin Tom Connors, and like I said, to me, a Canadian icon. You're bad Canadian if you don't know who he is. And I appreciate it, and I'm so glad that we finally got to have this interview. Thank you so much.
Me too. It's my thrill. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. And remember, if you're looking for My Good Times with Stompin Tom by Duncan Fremlin, you can go to www.whiskeyjackmusic.com. You can get a copy there. Hopefully we'll see if we can get him into the Artesian on Queen Street. You've been listening to Lisa Tucker. I've been talking to Duncan Fremlin on the book cover. You're listening on The Borderline, and remember, don't judge a book by its cover.
Duncan Fremlin here from the band Whiskey Jack, author of My Good Times with Stompin Tom. I invite you to check out my episode on the book cover with Lisa Tucker, and had the best time talking about Stompin Tom, the North Shore, Richard's Landing, Pumpkin Point Road, and all that. So give it a listen. If you're interested in a copy of my book, go to whiskeyjackmusic.com. I'm happy to send you one, and hope to see you in the Sioux sometime.